How do you see AI transforming structural engineering over the next, say, like 5 to 10 years? And what kind of changes do you anticipate in how engineers define value, deliver work, and then actually contribute to their projects?
I think maybe before talking about what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years is really having an understanding of what won't change. Structural engineers, as a profession, we design structures to resist gravity forces, vertical and horizontal forces, all kinds of different things, and really put a focus and emphasis on making sure that we provide designs that are safe.
Did you know that in just a few years, AI could reshape how engineers deliver value beyond drawings, beyond billable hours, and even beyond the business models most firms rely on today? In this episode of the AEC AI and Tech Strategy podcast, we're joined by John Michael, PhD, SC, an associate at KPFF in San Francisco, who is also the project manager of the NCSEA Foundation Structural Engineering Program on Artificial Intelligence, Dave Martin, SC, associate principal at Degenkolb Engineers, and Ayush, PE, and an AI software developer at HOK. Dave and Ayush also serve as contributors to the NCSEA Foundation's AI initiative, bringing unique perspectives from both engineering practice and software development. Today, we'll be talking about how firms can adopt AI without falling for the hype, the critical data needed to drive meaningful change, and the skills engineers must develop to thrive in an AI-powered future. If you're an engineer, firm leader, or tech strategist that is shaping the future of the built environment, this is a conversation you will not want to miss. But before we jump in, I want to tell you about our AEC PM Connect event, built for project managers who want to improve project delivery, communication, and leadership through practical sessions and tools. These events provide an avenue to connect with leading PMs in the industry. Visit aecpmconnect.com and register today. We currently have events in Kansas City and New Jersey, with more coming, and I hope to see you there in person. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with John Michael, Dave, and Ayush. Gentlemen, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking time to join.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so I really enjoy these tandem episodes because you get a little bit of a different vibe than our usual one-on-one conversation. So would each of you be able to take the time, introduce yourself, and share more about what you do in your current role? And John Michael, why don't we get kicked off with you?
Sure. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, my name is John Michael Wong, or JM for short, an associate at KPFF in San Francisco, and I've been a structural engineering designer for the past 16 years. My background is that I completed undergrad and PhD at UC Berkeley and had done a research on a variety of different topics, but have really enjoyed working as a design professional over these past several years. And in addition to that, my role now is I'm also serving as the project manager for the NCSEA Foundation's Innovation in Structural Engineering AI grant team. And NCSEA is a nationwide organization. It's actually an organization of all the 44 state member organizations that support practicing structural engineers nationwide. And the NCSEA's foundation was created to help advance the profession. And in specific, the foundation wanted to pick a topic for innovation to start in 2023. And the best topic to pick was artificial intelligence. And so now we currently have a team of 8 structural engineers who are focused on providing resources toward AI adoption across our profession.
Excellent. And Dave, how about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Dave Martin. I'm an associate principal with Degenkolb Engineers. I did tech development at the firm between 2018 and 22. I kind of stepped back from that a little bit to take a more active role in projects, but I'm still kind of helping lead our AI efforts at the company through our steering committee, as well as kind of influencing tech development in specific ways on our applied technology team. We've been guiding AI use at the company for the last couple of years, and also been participating in the AI grant team as well. So, I'm one of the older guys on the group, but, I'm thinking about it mainly from a project management and project execution standpoint, and essentially how we can use AI to affect our business more on an external focus than internal. So been fun working with these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ayush?
Yeah, hey, I'm Ayush. I'm a licensed civil engineer and have practiced structural engineering in the first few years of my career, but I've since then transitioned into a full-time AI software development role. And education-wise, I have both masters in structural engineering and masters in computer science, where I focused in machine learning mostly. And I'm currently a software developer at HOK, focusing on AI tools. So I'm architecting and developing end-to-end AI ML pipelines, mostly to help accelerate these project life cycles and improve the quality of our products, either by improving the project management or, marketing or just the modeling part of things. So I've kind of had the experience of structural engineering before and now software, so it feels like a great spot to be in.
Absolutely. So, and to the audience, right, we have 3 individuals who've practiced structural engineering at one point or another, and then in Ayush's case is actually transitioned to a role still in engineering, but a little bit of a different type, right? So we're having them speak from the realm of experience, right? Not just some generic AI pitch. So I just want to make that clear, because these 3 have a lot to offer and share with us. And so, John Michael, so I'll kick off the first question with you. So how do you see AI transforming structural engineering over the next, say, like 5 to 10 years? And what kind of changes do you anticipate in how engineers define value, deliver work, and then actually contribute to their projects?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nick, about just what the future holds for structural engineering. And I think maybe before talking about what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years is really having an understanding of what won't change over the next 5 to 10 years. And structural engineers as a profession, we design structures to resist gravity forces, vertical and horizontal forces due to earthquakes, wind, design structures to resist snow, water, soil, explosions, all kinds of different things, and really put a focus and emphasis on making sure that we provide designs that are safe and resilient to our community. Now, that will not change. The structural engineering profession will still be needed for those things that are essential to our built environment. But what will change, I think, is the way that those projects get delivered. And that is going to be the big shift that will occur over the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, even if we just look at the past 5 to 10 years and the ways that we implement digital model-based workflow in a lot of scenarios where we didn't previously. I mean, I remember when I first started working, I printed a lot of drawings. And now I think most of our workflow is electronic in PDFs. Now, granted, PDFs are still essentially paper. It's kind of the same thing. It's like a flat electronic file. But the way things will be delivered in the future, I think, is going to be the biggest shift. And we kind of outlined what we think is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years in a document that we call the NCSEA Foundation's AI Strategic Plan. And in that document, we kind of outlined where we think the industry is now and where we think the industry is headed for the future, and a suggestion for structural engineers about what they should be focusing on now. And I think the first part of that strategic plan document, which is available on the NCSEA website, is the thread of learning and strategy. Like, I think that's where we really are right now. I think people are just learning about what AI is and what it can do, and developing strategy around how they think they can take advantage of AI. But once we get over that initial learning and strategy phase, it's going to take some time to develop applications, to leverage AI in our workflow, and then grow and evaluate. And I think it's really over that next horizon, over the next several years, where there's going to be some bigger disruption and transformation across the industry. I think that all of us feel pressure to shorten timelines for construction. And I think there's going to be a need to focus on more highly complicated design work across the country. You think about the cities that we're living in now, and every time there's a new building, every time there's new infrastructure, the city gets that much more complicated. And I think the environment in which we work is a far more complex environment than we were in several decades ago. And so I think that we're going to be facing the greater challenges of the existing built environment even as we look to the future with new construction. So I think that our contribution as a profession is going to need to actually grow a lot, where we have a larger library of the past that we need to handle. And I think that AI is going to help us with that. And so one of the things that I see in terms of how we as engineers would define value and deliver work and contribute to projects is really to focus more on our core value, which is providing that safe and resilient design. And I kind of think about the way that the AI will work in a very similar way to how other professions have dealt with AI. I know that there was a famous quote from about radiologists working in AI, and it was said that radiology is going to go away because computers and AI will be able to read images so much better than a radiologist. And while the radiologist came back and said, no, that's not going to happen, actually what has happened is that technology in radiology has actually enhanced the field. Now people have new imaging technology and people are able to focus on patient care instead of focusing on managing diagnostic data. And I think that that's what's going to happen with AI in the design profession for us also, is that AI will allow us to really practice at the top of our license, so to speak, and really focus on where we as professionals can deliver the greatest value, and to allow AI to do what AI is good at, handling data, being able to automate workflows, and allow structural engineers to do what structural engineers are really good at.
That was a really, really excellent summary, John Michael. And I heard three things in particular. So one, the responsibility that falls on the profession doesn't change. Two, our value to society can become even greater, particularly if we're able to expand, the amount of service we can provide. And then three, there is a resource in, the foundation through NCSEA where all structural engineers can come and review your guys in the foundation's train of thought about how AI is going to affect our profession.
In the AEC industry, skilled project managers are the backbone of success. EMI's AEC PM certification offers tailored training, ongoing support, and exclusive access to premium content that keeps your team sharp and effective. From foundational training to advanced leadership tools, set your team apart with certified growth. Learn more at aecpm.com. That's aecpm.com.
And John Michael, so for those who aren't as familiar with AI, there's maybe a perception that AI is just tools, say like an LLM, like ChatGPT, but we know that there's more to it than just chatbots, right? What are some of the biggest misconceptions you see about AI in structural engineering today?
Yeah, one of the biggest misconceptions about AI is I think there's two. One is that AI is just a fad, and the other one is that AI is just ChatGPT. I think to the first point, AI is not a fad. I think that this is the next wave of new digital technology, and it's transforming a lot of different things across multiple industries. This is not just some passing thing, but it's something that we see in the broader world is being adopted for multiple different kinds of processes. And AI is so much more than just large language models and chatbots. I think that if we think about AI as broadly encompassing a different range of tasks that require human intelligence, I think it really helps us to understand what AI can do. AI can deal with things that are not just based on specific rules, but requires an aspect of judgment. And it performs tasks that we normally think of as requiring human intelligence, things like computer vision, speech recognition, transcription, choosing between options based on priorities, and even things now that we see in the industry like real-time live translation between languages. And I think that once we start to broaden our view of what AI can do, I think it helps us to look at how we can incorporate the computer to really be our assistant in helping us with our everyday tasks. And if we're able to leverage AI to let AI do what it's good at, then we can focus on things that maybe we're not as good at, but that we can focus on the things that we are really good at. Design work, reviewing, human collaboration, working with people. And those are the things that I think are the most valuable. It was interesting that the discussion about agents and the computer doing stuff, it's not new. I mean, these things have been around since computers were created, and there was a lot of interest in creating agents back in computer science research back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But what ended up happening is that people realized that people really weren't interested in talking to a computer, but people were extremely interested in allowing the computer to let them talk more effectively to other people. And I think that what's going to happen as we start to break into more about the broader reality of what AI can do is that it's different now because AI allows the computer to essentially speak English. And I think that that's really a barrier that didn't exist, or that existed before, but has now starting to break down. Now everyone uses things like Siri or, Hey Google, and you can talk to the computer, and the computer can give you results and talk to you and communicate with you. And I think that kind of two-way communication with the computer is something that is completely new and wasn't available before. And now people don't have to specifically learn how to code. You don't have to learn how to speak computer to get the computer to do things for you. And so as we see advances in technology, I think if we think about the broader perspective of what AI does and can do in now and in the future, I think that it'll broaden our perspective and know how to leverage it more.
I like that point, John Michael, because as you look back on the history of computers, right, it has only gotten simpler and simpler from the advent of UI, UX, a keyboard and a mouse to now, like you said, we can just speak in natural language just like we're talking to another human and have the computer understand us, right? For the most part, and there's obviously more nuance goes into it. And Dave, I'll throw this next question at you. So there is a difference between, I would say, these tools and chatbots out there, right? Having access to them, and then having, a strategy, whether it's for an individual or a firm to actually, get work done operationally using them. So from a leadership and strategy perspective, what are the most important elements of implementing AI effectively within a structural engineering firm?
Yeah. Thank you, Nick. That's a really good question. I think, starting with the leadership aspect of it is really critical. As just an example from some stuff we've done inside and talking to other firms, if you just say, sign everybody up to Copilot or give people a ChatGPT subscription, it doesn't mean people are going to use it. And, with all of these services at, $30 to $60 a month, that's kind of a huge issue, right? One of the things we've been doing at our firm is really having AI use and advocacy coming from the top down, right? And that journey kind of started with writing a good policy, right? Because when all of this stuff started coming out, 2 or 3 years ago, everybody was in fear mode, right? Like, how is my data going to get released to the public? Is this model getting trained on my data? Most of those security issues have been addressed at this point, and there's 3 to 5 enterprise LLMs that people can use, right? So, once people get through those security concerns and understand what type of data they need to restrict from AI, they can start deploying it to their company, right? With leadership, advocacy, and encouragement, not just saying you can use it, but you should. And this is how we're going to help you, right? So, you get your employees access to it, somewhere around the 20-person level. If you have everybody on it, it might make more sense to use a pay-as-you-go option, which is going to require some development. We've talked about that a lot recently and have some advocacy on our program on how to do that. But if not, say you start with ChatGPT or Google's platform or Copilot for Microsoft, which is getting better, but still probably not as good as the others, we start to get the need for user groups, right? People who are supporting each other, showing how they're able to mine their internal data content, emails, Teams messages, right? We've been using ChatGPT, like the Teams and enterprise version recently, and it is able to really pull together your personal data securely in a way that kind of helps you be more efficient. And our PMs are starting to talk to each other, being like, did you see it can do this? that's how you get the use out in your company and really starting to affect people, because if there's that learning barrier, they're just not going to really get there in a quick enough time, right? Companies need to ask themselves like what their current pain points are. How does that relate to a technology strategy? And I think that's one of the things that maybe is kind of clouded in this whole discussion around AI, is you can't really talk about AI without addressing your firm's core technology strategy, right? And that goes back down to leadership. What is a firm really doing to grow in their 5-year strategic plans? AI can support that, right? But a lot of what you need to do to start to leverage AI revolves having around a good technology strategy and investment. How much is a firm going to invest in this space? So, I think the one mistake that people may tend to make when they go beyond just Gen AI like ChatGPT is just focusing on internal things, right? Because I think a lot of the core value that people are going to see is when they understand how what they're doing internally is really affecting their downstream partners. And our group, has said from the beginning that the goal would be to basically get people using AI, but not at the expense of our industry, not to commoditize what we do, but to give us time to do more things, right? And the more focus people put just on internal efficiency, right, may have some short-term gains in being cost competitive, but that's like the race to the bottom. That's what we want to avoid, right? What we're really trying to think about is how can I free myself up to do things that provide higher quality, to focus more time on client development, to have more time to spend in one-on-one meetings with our partners, going to interviews in person and having good shows because you weren't bogged down by processing, a whole bunch of stuff that we don't really care about, right? So I think once we really realize that kind of external focus, I think that's going to help us understand where to put our money. And again, that all comes from a tech strategy from the top down. So I think the quicker firms can get on that, learning about what the opportunities are and then seeing how they can adapt it is where the value is really going to come from.
Really well said, Dave. And as a follow-up, based on any given firm strategy, how should teams approach the build versus buy discussion? For anyone who doesn't know what that means, Dave did allude to a little bit of internal development or building tools or systems internally at a company versus buying third-party or off-the-shelf solutions.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one because even small firms probably have some development function needed. And it doesn't have to be training models, actually training models. I think people use that term a little bit loosely, but, small firms are not likely to train models on their own data, but they may connect that data to AI. As much as people promise that's easily done out of the box, it usually takes some tweaking and customizing the system. So I think, for people who are doing the basics of, using ChatGPT or similar options, connecting their data, there's probably some need for like a consultant to support that, even if we call it, a consumer process, right? I think a lot of what we and others have been covering, though, is this tranche of software that would be consumable just by paying for a software license. And I think while these seem to promise the world and have a lot of application for our industry, they just aren't really there yet. And most of them focus on the front end of the project, right? Getting to your SD or DD level, or, basically getting in some QA/QC routines. But what I think is really adding a lot of value is consumer products that actually just use AI maybe as a small part of it, but at its core, it's still a consulting service. There's a company called Generate, which does mass timber consulting. Basically, they give you, 2-5 options for what your building might look like with costing. And the AI portion of their platform is all of the data that populates the sizing for a model, but they still generally draw it by hand. But at the end of the day, for us to develop those 2 to 5 options kind of in the older school way, we can't do it for the same price they can. And I think that's exactly the type of service that might start to be really valuable to small firms, is working with people who are using AI in the right way to really add value. I think where people can really all embrace development, though, is just getting coding to be more part of the standard workflow. And I will say that is the number one thing we've done at our firm, is encouraging people. We have like a company-wide coders group We do code reviews. People can attend a Friday at lunch with paid food to kind of understand how code is built so that when they start using Gen AI to generate coding, they have a better understanding of how it's supposed to be done. We do some development around AI. We have an internal custom chatbot, but I still see that as a temporary measure, and I suspect we'll be fully using some other paid platform in the future. But we're not really training models outside of some niche applications in machine learning. And I think that machine learning domain is still going to be a little out of reach for most people. So I think, the question of consuming versus developer, it's still gonna be an expensive process to develop like true AI solutions in-house. And maybe only the bigger firms are gonna do that at first, especially with the fact that data is still hard to come by, clean, reliable data on the design side. So I think, it just comes from that tech strategy on down. What should you spend your money on? If you just need a little help, what type of, third party could you get to help you with that, right? And I think that's just going to become more and more common as companies all face similar solutions. And we'll continue to watch the consumer stuff as it comes along too.
And Dave, that's kind of going back to John Michael's first point, right? Like our role, although the technologies and tools change, our role as engineers don't really change. Your role as a leader in a structural engineering firm, providing that guidance, providing that strategy doesn't change, although what specifically you're talking about might.
Yeah.
And speaking of development, Ayush, this is a good one for you. So for small and mid-sized firms that are beginning to explore AI, what are some practical and low-risk ways to get started? And then how do you personally evaluate whether a new tool is actually useful or maybe just part of like a hype cycle?
That's a great question, Nick. To get started, there's a lot of things that a company needs to figure out in terms of policy, like Dave was saying. And we've kind of talked about this a lot over the past 1 year with the AI grant team's effort. And we've produced documents that can help you kind of guide through this process. Like, there's a getting started guide. There's a AI policy document that you can look at to define your company policies. And all these things are kind of catered towards any size of firm because these are the things you start with a new technology, mostly out of the concern of privacy, right? And defining the strategy top down that Dave was talking about, which is important across any size of firms. I think one of the questions that typically comes with mid-size and small-size firm is we don't have the manpower of building big AI tools internally or like doing a lot of software development, or the research spend for a smaller firm is generally smaller. So how do we innovate? And I think for any size of firm who's starting with AI, I highly recommend first figuring out your AI policy to securely provide your employee with access to an AI chatbot like ChatGPT. I know it's as simple and very plain thing and seems like easy to do, but I think there's a lot in there, and most companies still don't have a secure way that their employee can talk about their internal processes, projects, etc. I think it's not an easy task. Dave talked about different approaches of doing this in one of our previous webinars, as he was just mentioning that they've worked on an internal tool that they've deployed. There are many ways of doing this. Based on your company size, you can pick one of these. You don't need to spend development time on that. But I think it's important to enable the thinkers in your firm to use these things for work, not just for their side hustle, personal stuff. And what it does is not just help with simple like email writing or learning something, but also helps develop code, simple like small automation tools, we call them mini apps, or even like a very quick POC that you can quickly build up and doesn't need a lot of time or a software developer. And this will indirectly propel innovation within the company very quickly. And it's kind of hard to always bring up development when we talk about a mid-sized and small firm, but we recently added Jesse to our team, which was a great example because he comes from a very small firm, but he in the past have hired software like a contractor software engineer to help develop these project management processes, connecting things together so they don't spend a lot of time filling out the same things, going through the same processes. And it has helped him a lot. And we always use this as a great example because of the size of the firm. Like a small firm can invest a little bit to improve a lot very quickly because they don't have as much legacy or dependency on changing so many people's mind. There are very few number of people you need who can adopt these things. So I think that's like one of the great things about AI, that you can have people are talking about a one-person startup and 10 people team building a unicorn. So I think the smaller teams are becoming more capable of doing these things. And I was listening to this talk from Andrew Wang at the Y Combinator Startup School, and he mentioned a very good point that there's a lot of PR and hype in like foundation models like, OpenAI and Anthropic, and there's a lot of hype in cloud, AWS, and similar firms. And then there's semiconductors, right? Everyone knows NVIDIA, and I bet 99% didn't know about NVIDIA like 4 years ago. So, but I think there's a lot of hype in this area for whatever reason, but the biggest opportunity have to be in the application layer, right? Because these application layer will eventually generate more revenue for all these other foundation model, cloud, and semiconductor. And I think AEC industry is like starting to scratch the surface of application layer. So as a firm, you should try to figure out a concrete idea that can impact your internal workflow over vague ideas. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say if I say I want to automate RFI response, right? That sounds very interesting and sounds like a great idea, but it's not a good idea because you can't really go and implement. If I tell this to someone, they can't just go and do something about it. So let's take another example. When someone says, I want to automate that when an RFI is received, I want to extract the structured information out of this and store it somewhere and then forward the RFI to the person who's responsible to respond. And that is a good idea. It's very specific. It may or may not work, but I know exactly what to do on it. So I think as a firm, when you're starting to think about AI, you need to find these types of concrete ideas. And then based on what your firm's strategy is, either to build or develop, you can proceed that way. So if you're trying to develop, use a lot of these AI tools to do POCs and see if it's worth investing in development, or you can go to find a startup or another tool outside that can do that thing. And it's important to think this way. I think it's called like inside out thought. Like you're trying to figure out a problem that you want to attack in your firm and then look for tools. And I would even clarify that it doesn't have to be an AI tool, right? It can be automation. Like when you're developing these, trying to solve these concrete problems, you may be using AI to develop a simple software that use no AI and it only does a certain automation for you, and that's okay. And if you are going to look for a tool or a startup who can solve this problem for you, I recommend attend a lot of demo days to find what people are doing and try to see if someone's solving the problem you're looking at. Which takes me to your second question of like assessing new tool or startup. And I usually talk to the technical founder or consultant to give me a live demo. And I think it's important to talk to someone who's building the tools. I personally felt that way rather than talking to like a sales representative. And it usually comes from the fact that I don't want you to show me a video of demo and like just, show all the good stuff. I want you to give me a live demo where I can ask you to do a few things, have an interactive session, so I really know if it can solve the problem, because I think the investment in adopting a new tool is a lot. And I think it's usually beneficial for both sides because they don't want to waste their time if you eventually end up not signing a contract with them. And obviously, as a firm, you don't want to spend a lot of time in unnecessary tools. So I think this helps both sides. So the approach should be you get this session, and I think focus on identifying two things. First is to identify, is there a problem, no matter how small that problem is, that the tool can solve end to end? I think that's to make sure that the team that's building the software, the tool, can close a loop on a product. And I think it generally makes me comfortable trusting the team. And then the second would be just remember, as an early adopter, you're not assessing the current, but the future capability of the product. So think about if the product roadmap is a combination of many of those concrete ideas that you've thought about. And if their dependencies, for example, LLMs or some hardware, are the roadmap of those respective companies. So if it's a foundation model, the company roadmap should be to improve those models, which is typically the case. So having a future out perspective of these tools while you're assessing them will help you kind of decide if they will be around, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. So yeah, I think that those are the two factors I usually keep in mind while reviewing a tool.
And Ayush, I really appreciated the point about, you're going back to what Dave was saying. You're starting with some sort of strategy that's dictated by leadership, some sort of strategic plan. Hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z over the next 5 years, which then dictates the problems that are in your way from accomplishing that. And then you're going to find the tools. So a problem in search of a solution and not the other way around, right?
Yep.
And John Michael, this is another one for you. So we talk about data in the context of AI, and I think all of us going back to our first experience in college with structural analysis software, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And that's another just timeless truth. It doesn't matter what sort of technology you're dealing with. So in the context of what we've been discussing, what types of industry data do you think are the most essential to making AI impactful in structural engineering? And what are the biggest challenges when it comes to standardizing or sharing it across the profession?
Yeah, that's a key question because machine learning is based on mountains of data for training. And really a lot of times when we think about AI systems, we're using AI in many ways for information retrieval and for data. And one of the challenges to data, I think, is actually data sharing. And I think one of the biggest challenges is this interesting paradox that exists in our industry, in the sense that people vertically in the delivery chain have all of our data. Like, for example, most of our clients are architects. Architects have all of my drawings, all of my Revit models, but they also have all of Dave's drawings and Dave's models. And the challenge is that, the architect, they have every subconsultant's information about all of their own projects over the past. Now, within the industry, we might not want to share with other structural engineers because we think that our details are special and that we need to protect our own intellectual property. And so there might be some resistance to sharing data horizontally, but vertically, a lot of our deliverables are already shared. I'll take that a step further. General contractors have all our data. They have data not just from multiple structural engineers, but also deliverables from multiple different architects as well. And if we take that one step further, the owners have all of it, especially the big owners, the big institutional owners, university systems, healthcare systems, government agencies. They have all of this information. And I think the challenge is, are people using it and leveraging it? And is it in a way that can be leveraged for good purposes? And so I think when I think about data sharing, I think of some of those types of barriers that exist to sharing. And I think there needs to be some discussion about how to do it in a smart way. I think about aspects of structural engineering that have really benefited from standardization and data sharing. For example, every structural engineer learns about the AISC steel manual. We have tables of shapes, and it's very standardized to be able to pick a steel section. Also, in reinforced concrete, we know a lot of information from ACI and code documents that talk about it. For timber, we have industry standards for codes like the NDS and the special design provisions for wind and seismic. So our industry already has a lot of really good standardized data. But what's missing in that standardized data is that within our building codes and within our reference tables, a lot of them are designed and delivered in a way that makes it easy for people to read. Color coding charts and tables, having a table of contents and an index, and like thumb tabs to be able to flip through your paper really quickly. And all of that makes it really easy for us to read, but it makes it really hard for the computer to read. And I think what's needed is really kind of the next generation of codes and standards, which are digital first. And I've seen a lot of effort and attention put into reading PDFs and digesting codes and standards and reference information from PDFs into a more tangible digital format. But I would say, like, why stop there? Why not just make them digital first and have all the information accessible up front? And I think when that happens, I think it's really going to unlock a lot of the potentials for the future. Because I think right now our profession and the industry is really set back by these barriers to data access and implementation.
Gotcha. And John Michael, that is that piece about making our codes and standards more, let's say, readable to a computer is very interesting. And I think that first step of just, hey, here's what we have, like, how can we basically train the computer to make it easy to read what the humans produced instead of, right, training the humans to make it easy for the computer. That's a good first step. And I really do think your other point about how much data is already out there and is, I guess, from a vertical point of view, already in the hands of someone. And actually, I'll draw from an anecdote I heard from, it was an individual with one of the larger producers of one of the 4 or 5 popular LLMs that Dave had made a point about earlier. And they actually discussed how they open source all of their data center plans and information, right? So for each iteration, everybody's learning from one another. So I thought it was kind of ironic in the moment, because here we're, the customers that are making AI possible, right? Utilizing our services for design and construction of data centers with pretty much the complete opposite mindset that the industry has had to this point. And they're just sharing the data amongst what could be seen as competitors for the benefit of all. But I think that is more common in software, open source, essentially the concept of open sourcing, that it really is in AEC.
Yeah, and I think that there are some efforts underway. I know that there is an effort to make more codes and standards available. I was recently at the Cold Formed Structural Engineers Institute Expo in Raleigh, North Carolina. And there was a whole session in their emerging technologies forum that talked about, digital versions of their equations in all of the cold form steel manuals. I think one of the barriers for engineers to work with cold form steel in the past has been just dealing with a lot of the technical information. And now there's open source codes that are being developed, and some of them are already available for engineers to directly reference these open source standards, so that there's no need to kind of rewrite the same equation again, potentially with mistakes that don't get corrected.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, this whole idea of like open sourcing or helping your competitors to get better is usually driven because you're trying to make a change in the industry, and you kind of almost know if you're the only person doing it, you would probably not make it. So you want to change the mindset, shift the current norms, and that's when people try to like share and open source things, so it can kind of help propel the whole industry in towards one goal. And I think we've seen a lot of these things being adopted in new industry. For example, Tesla open sourced a lot of their stuff when they were seeing slowdown in other competitive car makers not being able to make electric cars like they do. So they've open sourced a lot of their information before to help everyone kind of accelerate their process. And I'm kind of seeing it to come in our industry. Like one of the things I've started working with is this consortium called IDC, Innovation Design Consortium. It's a bunch of architect firms coming together to develop frameworks that can help with AI software deployment. We've all kind of known that doing POCs and creating these small ideas just to be able to judge if it's possible is easier than deploying them and making it available for all your firms. So they've come together and started kind of building these things as a single effort rather than each company doing their own. So I think as a team, we have talked about this type of approach coming into every part of the AEC industry, and hopefully having less resistance on sharing data, or at least building a platform that can utilize your data. I think right now, because there's no platform, there's a lot of misconceptions of what you could do with data, or like lack of understanding of what you could do. And it comes from the fact that you haven't seen everything together yet, and it's something new in that you're trying to do. So I think we'll start to see more of these committees and consortiums coming together and building some sort of software rather than just, code provisions. We've done these things on code provisions a while because we know that a single firm cannot do it. It has to be the whole industry that needs to adapt a certain code, a certain laws, or even practices. Like we come out with design examples through different orgs, and those design examples become industry norm, and everyone's doing the anchor kelp the same way because there was a design example that was done and everyone follows it. So yeah, I think we'll start to see some sort of like these companies coming together and building an application that they can utilize. And I think the idea would be, I know maybe Dave can talk about it, but they have worked on, for example, like developing OpenSea's automation, and I think, I don't know the details, Dave, maybe you can talk about it, but essentially it was similar where multiple companies came together to build something.
And Ayush, that is actually a great segue into the next question I've got here for Dave. Not so much oriented to like a specific product like OpenSeas, but Dave, so we're going to see change in the way we do our work. We know that as an admin of AI. But how do you see the role of just human judgment and creativity evolving within teams in our industry?
Yeah. Well, like some aspects of the industry are going to have opportunities and changes a lot faster than others. And we're already seeing that right now. Some of the consumer facing design automation tools, behind the scenes, is it AI? Probably mostly not. But a lot of the UIs are probably built with AI, and they're focusing on smaller construction, multifamily homes, multifamily residential projects, up to say 4 stories, hotels. A lot of those facilities are really ripe for modular, and modular works really well with AI and laying out and getting plans on sort of like test fit or HiPAR type workflows, where you can basically test fit a structure and basically get layouts very quickly. Machine learning and AI are helping with all of the product and parts needed to make it happen. And if it's not in a high seismic zone, a lot of the design is pretty easy to automate, right? So a lot of that automation is going to creep its way into specific products over the next couple years, which either firms are going to use to have a competitive advantage or get answers a lot faster for developers. I think you're already seeing that to some extent, but it's probably not the standard yet, right? As you step beyond projects where the criteria and definitions for what that space is going to look like are a little harder to deal with, like healthcare, or any projects that have peer reviews or are using nonlinear analysis, I think that's where the opportunity really is, but it's a lot harder problem, right? So getting back to what Ayush mentioned about, OpenSeas, we want to work with platforms that are fully programmable through either API or building models and data resources completely through command line or with code, right? So, some of the vendors that we all use, I'm not going to mention them, are very expensive and have a lot of restrictions on how they're run and how fast the response times can be. And even though I feel like our firm is putting out fantastic designs, the amount of effort that it takes to get there is intense, right? And so, we don't have really clean data for all of our designs, and it's really hard to clean that data, right? So we're taking more of a synthetic data approach, which is what most firms who are leveraging machine learning or automation are doing, right? If you want to, say, tune an irregular structure for torsion, right? That's something that automation is going to really help with. It's a recursive analyze, look at the drift plots, look at the balance, adjust your sections. And there might be 20 parameters you're looking at to optimize in that process. Once you set up an algorithm for that, likely using AI to either help if it's just coded, or if there's some AI and machine learning behind the scenes, you may have enough data sets to really start doing something with that, right? And some of the leading firms using machine learning out there are generating all of their data as synthetic. I think those big firms have the advantage that they have the budget to do so, right? And they can focus on the problems that are unique and valuable. Like core wall design in a tall building is like a great machine learning problem. If you're trying to lay out exactly where the best frame lines are to go, if you simplify it, it's a great machine learning problem to get you to your DD or SD level frame design. But then the back end, we still have to check all of these things rigorously to meet our obligations as professional structural engineers. So I think that as time goes on, some big firms, especially medium-sized firms, are really going to work on this to make sure that they're responding quickly and increasing quality. And the more synthetic data they have, the more they can get to that answer very quickly. And then the back-end development, the stuff where we spend the most time, I think there's just an immense amount of value. If we can imagine if that effort from SD or up to DD was replaced with just focusing on CD, because you got to that early phase so quickly, right? I think that's what we're hoping for, because we're not addressing sustainability as much as we should. Our structures are not as efficient as they could be. Or not just efficiency, but performing the way they should be after earthquakes. We have resiliency challenges. There's so many things that we could be doing better. And I think that's the goal is that firms will focus on using these things to really increase our value and thinking about how we can work a little bit more closely with our partners and thinking about where these structures end up downstream. So I think, the downsides of all this is, the faster people do things, there's going to be downward pressure on fees. But I think, the firms that are thinking about the right way will be thinking more of an increased revenue per head, which is, if you compare us to other industries, our revenue per head is about the same as Walmart, right? Nothing against Walmart. It's just, it reflects pretty close margins, right? As you get into more tech industries, their revenue per head is 5 times what ours are. Contractors are like 2 to 4 times as much as us. And so, there's a lot of opportunity. It's just the implications of if some firms are increasing their revenue per head, there's what's happening to the other people around them, right? Is the business coming from other people, or are they increasing their services, which isn't directly impacting their competitors, right? So I think, as time goes on, this is all going to start to be a lot more relevant for everyone. It's just happening a little slower than I think everyone expected, right? Because, some of these projects are already booked. They're going to last 7 years, right? So you can continue doing it the way you've always done it for those. I think in 2 to 5 years is when we're going to start seeing things really shift.
And Dave, to summarize, and the 2 points I took away from that were, one, so like John Michael said, the highest and best use, like the top of our licensure, particularly SE, providing, doing things like you said, so sustainability, performance-based design, and then resilience that we're not doing as well as we could in theory. And then to your point about, right, different business models, different ways of running your core business, right?
Yeah.
Not just doing what we do today more efficiently and a race to the bottom.
Exactly. And probably one of the core aspects of that is communicating the value of what we do to our stakeholders, because,
Absolutely.
I have a feeling there's a lot of owners out there that just see it's the steel, the concrete, what have you. They forget about it after it's covered up. They don't have a concept of what they bought, how it's going to perform. And is sustainability a part of their goals or not, right? So I think we have a big communication problem in our industry. We don't sell what we do enough. AI is not going to necessarily fix that, right? So if we want to continue to stay relevant and achieve the fees we're used to, we have a big PR problem to solve.
Absolutely. Okay. So Ayush, I've got one for you here. So how is AI changing the expectations for AEC professionals at different levels, from entry-level staff to experienced project managers? Because I'd have to assume, depending on your level, your role, and what you do specifically in any given firm, like your use of the technology is going to vary, and then the expectations that come along with it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and certainly going to be the case where responsibility for everyone will shift and expectations will shift accordingly. I would first like to talk about the entry-level staff, because I've heard a lot of concerns that the use of AI tool implies loss of learning for these new engineers. And I certainly understand where the thought is coming from, However, I typically argue that, in fact, learning has never been easier. I think it depends on the user's intention, and that's where the entry-level staff needs to pay attention. Whether it is their intention is to learn or just get the task done blindly. And it's the case really for any automation, not just AI. So coming back to my point of like thinking learning has never been easier, like think about if I wanted to learn something new before ChatGPT, I would typically go to Google search and search for, the topic I'm trying to learn. And in most cases, will struggle in the beginning to find the article or page that is at the right level for me to start learning. I could be a beginner, I could be an advanced, and usually it would be me shuffling through these pages trying to find the right place to start. And maybe I'll watch some lectures and spend a lot of time with like the beginning stuff that I know and then eventually get to the point I'm comfortable at. But now I can just define my level and interactively learn about new topics in these AI chatbots. And I think that's really the approach that these entry-level engineers and staff needs to take. Their intention shouldn't be just to get the task done, but to learn through this process. And we've seen this before, right? When computers came and ETABS came and Revit came, any of these automations doesn't imply that you stop learning. I think the idea should always be to learn and then move forward. And my point being, the opportunity cost of not learning is very high right now. And because learning has been redefined like it was when internet came, right? It's much easier, and if you don't learn, you will quickly be left very, very behind. So the intention should always be to learn. And it impacts the entry level most because they come in and their objective is mostly to learn for a few years to then be eventually able to produce, make a bigger impact, produce bigger part of the project. I think I remember when I joined the profession, the workforce, I used to wait for my manager to free up so I can just go and ask some questions. And they're always so busy with the meetings and projects, like maybe 5 projects. And I would waste a lot of time. But I think most of those questions can now, with some context, can be answered by AI. And one of the expectation with entry levels that's starting to emerge is the ability to code. Of course, using AI assistant, and it's almost like spreadsheet right now. If you don't know spreadsheet when you came in, maybe 5 years ago in the industry, you would be, not capable of doing most things. So this comes directly from the improvement in AI assisted coding and changes how we approach junior engineers. I remember like this is not too far ago, in 2018, I won't name the company, but when one of my friend was interviewing a structural engineering company and they saw him taking some AI courses at university, they basically told him that they cannot proceed with him because he might shift to the computer science industry. And it has always reminded me of how much the industry has shifted and the expectations have shifted. So when we interview now, and I've seen most engineering firms interviewing now, they see the capability of coding and doing automations as a big strength because now everyone realized that that's where the industry is headed. So that's for junior entry-level staff. I think for project manager, the expectation is to drive a lot of these changes in the industry by utilizing AI, by utilizing automation. A major expectation is adaptability, as they're so set in their ways, but they're also the one who knows most of the pain points in the process. However, adopting a new tool is daunting. Like there's a lot of time and learning that you need to spend on these tools, and then there's a chance that it won't even fit the need or the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think they are in the best position to come up with, those concrete ideas I was talking about, and it should become a part of their job. I've seen a strong correlation between the manager's ability to spend time thinking about innovation and their mentees being able to deliver them. And I think this goes back to Dave's point, like it needs to come from top to bottom. What I've seen so far in the industry is it's usually bottom to top. Like you have to really come up quickly with an innovation idea and really make your point through about ROI so that you can finally convince your manager or your principals to give you some time to actually make a real product. So I think that expectation now is changing, not just because junior engineers won't come up with those ideas. I think it's because we can be better, and these managers can, give away a lot of their boring tasks like filing emails or processing RFI, like just reading through, looking up the name, who they should send it to respond, managing project timelines between different projects and emails, and a lot of these very, very boring tasks will hopefully slowly go away, and they'll free up, and their time will be better spent in innovation and doing things we really want to do, and propel their junior engineers to kind of come up with these innovative ideas. So I think that's where we're either already seeing or will see changes in the coming days with AI.
And that was a great summary. And I think what is underappreciated or maybe not thought about as much is, unlike previous innovations that were kind of confined to just like the profession, right? Like you get a principal who's like, hey, I don't have time because I'm dealing with today. You might have one of your senior leaders go home and try like a new feature from a consumer, $20 a month LLM. And they may just think, holy cow, like, why aren't we doing this like at the firm that I'm like in charge of? And then that like in your face experience then may make them go to somebody like Ayush and say, hey, like, I had this experience. I know what it's like now. What can we do to do this as a pilot or firm-wide? And that's really powerful because I don't really know of another technology that's kind of blurring the line between what we do in our personal lives and then what we could be doing in our professional lives.
Yeah, it goes back to like learning becoming so easy and the capabilities, exploding infinitely. Even my manager, he was an architect who's been practicing for, I think, over 25 years. And like now he comes to us not with just a vague idea. He comes to us with a POC that, he vibe coded overnight because he's the best person to come up with these ideas. So yeah, I think that's where we're going to see a lot of improvement in the application layer for our industry.
And so, Ash, from your last response, I heard about the skills that are going to be needed depending on level. Learning, coding / software development, vibe coding in some cases for those of us like me who are not trained engineers in that sense. Being adaptable and having an open mindset depending on what level you're at. Any other skills you would say are important for AEC professionals to have to remain competitive as AR starts to become more and more embedded in what we do day to day?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it takes back me to this phrase that we've all heard, that AI won't replace human workers, but professionals who use AI will replace those who don't. Hence, the most important skill would be the ability to best utilize these AI tools to learn faster and code faster. I think we're going away slowly from a lot of the jargon tasks that we were accustomed to spend a lot of time. And I've certainly heard people talking about that they love doing it because it gives them better ideas of how things really are. But I still truly believe that there are a lot of things that can be automated without losing learning out of it. So I think the skill here I'm looking for isn't necessarily a tool, but it's the idea that you need to utilize these things and keep learning. The approach of of any of these tools or capabilities should always be the opportunity to learn rather than the opportunity to get things done. And I think someone who can do that will probably be best situated and competitive in the future.
And that actually brings up a point that's been kicking around in the back of my head is, if you can take out some of the non-value added work that just naturally goes into our profession, can you gain that 7 years of experience in like 5 to 5.5 because you've just started to, right, like of that 8-hour day you spend, and instead of you doing 6 actual hours of engineering and 2 hours of whatever else, right? Can you bump that from 6 to 7 or whatever the case may be? My point being, is I agree with you, because there are going to be ways to continue to learn and gain the skills that we need as engineers without as much of the busy, rote, mundane work that kind of comes in between.
Exactly. Yep.
And then, John Michael, we will end the last individual question with you. Final piece of advice you can share with professionals in our industry that want to stay ahead of AI, but maybe aren't so sure where to start.
I think that if you want to stay ahead in the age of AI, the most important thing to do is to be human. I think that we need to focus on where our value really is. Technology scales, automation scales, but relationships don't scale. Our industry is about solving really human problems by building structures. And so these are things that we're accomplishing for the betterment of other people. And I think if we keep that the focus and stay focused on what we do as professionals to bring value to our clients, bring value to the community around us, then it prompts us to ask the right questions. We can ask what's really important and what's holding us back from doing more. And how can we utilize AI to break down those barriers? I think that AI is here, and as we think about our role, it's something that cannot be ignored. And it's not just a singular technology, as we've been discussing throughout the earlier discussions. And it's a shift across multiple industries. And it's going to be a shock to some people, because I think that there may be some people out there that they think their value proposition is to be faster and less expensive. But in reality, that if that's your value proposition, then you might get displaced by something that's even faster and even less expensive. But instead, I think that as we think about where AI can help us, when we were having a discussion earlier about build versus buy, or consume versus develop, and we're entering into a space now where before, building your own tools was extremely expensive and extremely prohibitive in terms of the skill and the learning curve associated with it. But with AI, the barrier to building your own tools and to actually implementing the workflow and the process that you've always wanted to implement, that's actually within reach now. And so I think it gives AEC professionals an opportunity to think ahead about transformational business models, to think about how you can deliver your work and projects for your client in the way that you've always wanted. And I think in the end, structural engineers are not going to get replaced by AI. We're still an important part of protecting public safety and providing resilience to the community. And I think we're not going anywhere. But I think it is true that structural engineers who use AI may well replace those who don't.
Really well said, John Michael. And I think, that your comment about, right, like the race to the bottom, like that's an innate quality of a computer, right? It can do things faster, and the domains that it's suited for. It can do things faster, and then in many cases, right, time is somehow correlated to cost, driving everything down. And then the second point is, I really liked your point about how, in short, right, AI is on this exponential track in terms of what it can do. But the way, we've just talked over this entire interview, and human relationships are very much still linear. They don't really change that much, right? We still communicate in relatively the same way. So that's maybe not something that's going to change anytime soon. So if you're able to combine your unique skill set, right, as a structural engineer with the human side and being able to provide value to clients and understanding what our role is in society, I think you're going to be set up to do really well.
Yeah, I think that people who develop those skills and intuition will be able to thrive and to be able to leverage technology in their favor.
And gents, before we close out, just occurred to me that NCSA is having its annual summit. I think it's October 14th through 17th in New York City this year. Is the foundation going to be doing anything special or separate related to AI that you think the audience should know about or check out if they're in the area?
Oh yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Nick. We're doing a lot of things actually. And on the first day of the summit on Tuesday, the 14th of October, our AI grant team is going to be running a pre-conference workshop. And so that pre-conference workshop is going to be more of a hands-on format where we're going to have two different tracks. And we're going to have a track that's focused on consumers. Those are people who are using or adopting existing AI tools. And then we're also going to have a separate track that you can select for developers, people who are actually writing code to leverage AI platforms and products. And so it's going to be a great opportunity. We have a guest speaker also coming from HOK to be able to describe trends in the industry, one of Ayush's colleagues from New York City. And then also at the end of the summit on Friday, Ayush is going to be one of the keynote speakers, in addition to two other people on the AI grant team. And we're going to talk about how small teams and small firms can have an outsized impact using AI. And so it's going to be a fantastic event where we're really going to focus in on how a small number of people can make a big difference in the industry. And along with that, afterwards, at the conclusion, at the very end of the summit, after the keynote session, our entire grant team is planning to be available for just interactive chatting with people, Q&A discussions, and being a resource to all the attendees.
Absolutely. And John Michael, I'm really glad that you guys were able to bring this up because it is timely as people are starting to finalize maybe some of their Q4 travel and events if they're able to. So that'll be October 14th through 17th of this year at the Midtown Hilton in Manhattan and in New York City. If you are able to make it and want to find out more information about the event, ncseasummit.com. We'll also include that in the show notes. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. If the audience has questions about anything we discussed or just wants to connect with you and chat after they listen to the show, what is the best way for them to reach you? And Dave, why don't we get started with you?
Yeah, I mean, I work for Degenkolb Engineers. My contact information is publicly listed on the website. We're also easily available as part of the AI NCSEA grant team. Jan can discuss a little bit more on that, but we're doing webinars and in-person work through NCSEA and CEOC. So as a group, we're pretty easy to reach, and we've got a lot of things coming with local MOs and other opportunities.
Excellent. And Ayush, how about you?
Yeah, apart from what Dave mentioned, if you want to directly reach out to me, my email is firstname.lastname@hok.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and message me over there.
Excellent. John Michael?
And it's the same for me as well. First name, last name at kpff.com. I think the other way you can reach us as a team is to send an email at ai@ncsea.com. And that will come to the AI grant team. And I think our combined resources can assist with any questions that people have. The other thing is not just asking questions, but I think receiving comments is really helpful for us. And I would invite any of the listeners to send us a comment about some of the things that you're seeing in the ways that AI is affecting you and your workflow. If you come across something that's interesting and you want to share it with us, that would be great too, because I know that we can all have more eyes and ears on changes in technology.
Excellent. And gentlemen, thank you again so much for taking the time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.